Welcome to the Live Poet Society podcast, hosted by Aspen Chung and Luna Cup. I remember lying awake at 2 a.m., waiting, hoping for that familiar chime of my phone thrown onto my pillow beside me. My eyelids were drooping as I fought hard to keep myself awake. In a fleeting moment of hope, I tapped my screen, opening the app. Maybe the notification just didn't go through, I thought to myself. But nothing. Delivered 2 hours ago, blazed white under their name. I told myself I wouldn't wait any longer and went to close my phone. But all of a sudden, there it was. My heart fluttered, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. My finger hovered over the message banner, but the excitement had already worn off, and reality had hit. I couldn't respond too quickly, or I'd seem desperate, but I didn't want to wait too long either, or it'd just be weird. And when I did answer, I had to keep it short and nonchalant, though I had to leave subtle hints so I didn't sound disinterested. But all of this, for what? A single message back, shortened with single letters in place of words and lingo that I'd surely have to Google, all for barely a snippet of a conversation stretched long over many hours of the day. It's all just so exhausting. In this age of online technology, we've all experienced being left undelivered, rewording our messages over and over again until they sound perfectly indifferent and cool, having to decode the language that has woven its way into our messages, and all the other little details that this new form of communication entails. Yet, despite all of this, online messaging will never quite be the same as face-to-face conversation. In the poem Text, Carol Ann Duffy seamlessly encapsulates the nuances of online messaging as opposed to the natural flow of in-person communication, and articulates the disconnect and silence that arises as a result. Text by Carol Ann Duffy. I tend the mobile now like an injured bird. We text, are significant words. I reread your first, your second, your third. Look for your small XX, feeling absurd. The codes we send arrive with a broken cord. I try to picture your hands, their image is blurred. Nothing my thumbs press will ever be heard. When considering the formatting of the poem itself, minimal and grouped in simple two-line stanzas, we realize that it mimics the style of online messaging. I like how Duffy doesn't incorporate elaborate detailing or the conventional whimsical style of poetry in text. Rather, she uses terse and ever so slightly uncomfortable language, subconsciously referencing the mind to the style of online communication. The comparison of the phone to an injured bird at the very beginning of the poem is immediately referring to the connection that the author has to her phone and how she is constantly using it, similar to how one would tend to an injured animal. It's important to take note Duffy's use of repetition, as she writes text are significant words, as emphasis that as a society we have come to a point where we lack face-to-face communication for even the most important details, which are still communicated over text. This is highlighting the disconnect we have with a person, regardless of the content, simply because we utilize a form of communication that inherently forms a barrier between people. These barriers are especially prevalent when considering the attempt to convey a fondness or endearment of someone to them. And though it remains possible to be straightforward, online communication presents the often utilized opportunity to hide behind a screen, and eliminates the forms of affection that are present in face-to-face communication, such as physical touch, eye contact, or even a simple smile or chuckle. Rather, it's replaced it with codes, as Duffy details in the line, the codes we send, or perhaps emojis, which can often be misleading and misinterpreted. And despite having a similar idea, these messages filled with phrases that require decoding and translation simply to feel affection could never quite replace the natural flow of in-person conversation. And as Duffy writes, Look for your small XX, feeling absurd. She's describing this exact idea. The phrase XX is a commonly used form of relaying affection, and this stanza of the poem is indicating the relentless search for words of affection or any hints of sentiment that online communication introduces that feels awkward and unnatural. By using the phrase, a broken chord, Duffy not only refers to the literal chime of a message that we are all so familiar with, indicating the start or continuation of a broken-up conversation, but it also serves as a metaphor that as we text, we are essentially sending broken chords lacking the symphony and natural rhythm that is face-to-face conversation. And so, as the overall tone and connotation of the poem suggests, Duffy is relaying dissatisfaction, and quite honestly, sadness, towards this form of broken messaging and the soundlessness that it brings to the world of communication. The last two stanzas really highlight this idea of silence despite the connection that texting provides us, by stating that despite rereading the messages multiple times and building a connection with them that involves a search for affection, the speaker of the poem can barely picture their supposed lover, nothing but a pair of blurred hands. And of course, ending the poem on a resonating note by stating that nothing my thumbs press will ever be heard, for the last and final time. Duffy re-emphasizes this often overlooked paradox of online messaging, that despite being intended as a device of connection and communication, to send a text replaces our relationships and voices with solitude and silence.
I tend the mobile now like an injured bird. I reread your first, your second, your third, looking for your small XX, feeling absurd. These lines reveal that the speaker of the poem is actually messaging the person with whom they are in a romantic relationship. They are obsessing over their texts, rereading them over and over, treating their phone with care as if it's a living thing or pet. The codes we send arrive with a broken chord. I tried to picture your hands, their image is blurred. Nothing my thumbs press will ever be heard. The connection and understanding we get from conversations can't be accomplished through a single text, as they break the connecting cord between people that in-person communication creates. Words on the screen are not as meaningful or powerful as the words coming out of a person's mouth and the person speaking them. The speaker is not satisfied with a conversation where their words won't be heard and their faces can't be seen. Reading this poem made me feel guilty. Texting has become such an important and even essential part of my social life. While I know that a single one-dimensional text isn't as meaningful as face-to-face interaction, I've grown so attached that I could probably go days without seeing my friends in person. Similar to the speaker in the poem, I acknowledge this less than ideal means of connecting, but still use it. Electronic interaction means so much to us, even if the human interactions that we should prioritize are right outside our electronic bubble. Carol Ann Duffy was raised in Stafford, England, and writes many poems mainly with concepts of love. Within these poems, she includes subtle commentary on current society. She wrote a collection of poetry called Rapture in 2005. The Rapture is a love story with a tragic ending, also commenting on the transition to online texting or communication on people's relationships. In this collection, Carol Ann Duffy explores the different phases and feelings through love. Text describes the experience of a person who is messaging their lover but is not satisfied with the soundless, bodiless text she is talking to. I tend the mobile now like an injured bird. We text are significant words. I reread your first, your second, your third. Looking for your small XX, feeling absurd. The codes we send arrive with a broken chord. I tried to picture your hands, their image is blurred. Nothing my thumbs press will ever be heard.
We would like to acknowledge and thank the following.
This poem can be found in the collection of poetry Rapture by Carol Ann Duffy. Music was retrieved from bensound.com, The Independent for biographical information on the author, poemanalysis.com for extra research and analysis, and Soundtrap for the making of the podcast.